and welcome to the University of Illinois Extension Specialty Food Producers Seminar Series. Today we continue the series with our third seminar entitled The Importance of Branding. I am Terry Miller, Publicist and Promotion Specialist with the University of Illinois Extension Unit 18. I am joining you from the Montgomery County Extension Office in Hillsborough, and here with me is Amanda Cole, Extension County Director. I am also joined by Lisa Peterson, Nutrition and Wellness Educator at the Christian County Extension Office in Taylorville. Lisa, do you want to say hi so we can hear you?
Hello!
Hello, Taylorville. Thank you, Lisa. Before beginning today's seminar, I would like to take a moment to introduce our guest panelist. First, we have Diane Forsey of Forsey Vineyards, located in Coffeen. An adopted daughter of the state of Illinois, Diane Forsey spent most of her life southeast of Napa, California. When her husband returned to his home state of Illinois, retiring from the Air Force, she reluctantly agreed to snow, which we have today, rain, tornadoes, and icy winds in lieu of an occasional earthquake. Educationally, Diane has utilized her education at Southern Illinois University in commercial marketing and communication to bring forward a lifetime dream. Optional courses in commercial art, historical art, public speaking, and written courses have all helped her to hone skills necessary in bringing a commercial winery to fruition. Forsey also spent 20 years as a loan officer and then community bank executive for Bank of America, as well as AVP of the national company. She assisted with interpersonal relationship building and developed a finance background involving commercial loans and credit card lending, as well as earning certificates from the American School of Banking in Chicago and Dun and Bradstreet. Planting vines in 2003 after 3 years of intense research into the Midwest vines and winemaking at Shawnee College evolved into a winery facility in 2006, followed by a year and a half of wine style development. In February of 2008, the winery opened to the public, which has been open year-round since. As of 2017, the winery has expanded 5 times, extending seating capacity from 30 in 2008 to more than 225. Distribution and retail sales have increased wine production from 1,100 gallons in 2007 to more than 6,000 gallons today. This still makes Forsey a small winery in the scheme of things, but allows for greater quality control. Thank you for joining us, Diane.
Thank you.
We are also joined via phone by Kenneth Ropp of Ropp Jersey Cheese from Normal, Illinois. For nearly as long as there has been a state fair in Illinois, the Ropp family cherishes the land's fruitful agriculture and nurtured it into wholesome products. Ever dedicated to maintaining the integrity of the local landscape, their operations continue to seek ways to make the most of their resources with the greatest respect, minimal waste, and the highest quality product. The family's 7th generation continues to refine its craft from a small, multiple commodity operation to an expanded dairy operation featuring heralded Jersey cows to an on-site cheese production facility. They are excited to expand their full-fledged minimal waste dairy strategies into beef, pork, and poultry. While their business was initially inspired as a self-sustaining family farm, their appreciation of conscientious strategies resulting in quality projects has encouraged them to share the knowledge they have gleaned over the years. Never wavering from the basis, the Ropp family continues to create and distribute the highest quality products. Again, we are pleased to have Diane and Ken with us today. Today's presentation is more of a roundtable discussion, and we will begin with each guest answering a few questions about their branding efforts and experiences. We'll start off with each guest telling us a little bit about their background and how they got started in the industry. And since it's ladies first, Diane, if you could talk to us a little bit about your background and how you got started.
We had a registered Red Angus herd, 60 cows, and we did boxed beef sales in the local area. We got to the point where we had too much on our plate and decided to strategize by making sure that we were utilizing our farm effectively and our time. And we dropped to grain farming, and we wanted something else to go with the beef. Well, what goes with beef? We had this whole industry right underneath our noses in the Midwest of wine, and it goes very, very well with beef. So we started checking out the different wineries in Missouri and Illinois. We found there were 16 in Missouri and 16 in Illinois at that time, and we spent many a weekend asking questions, going through vineyards, learning the craft that we were about to get into. Never, ever thinking that we were going to be what we are today. We're very small, but we've come a long way from planting grapes in 2003. We've had a lot of changes in our operation, and we've pretty much come full circle, finding that distribution is very demanding, very challenging. We have with the liquor, we find that the major distributors throughout the United States don't like the small business people being out there being able to distribute wine and beer. And it's created some unique situations when you go out there into the stores with your product and find that your product's been moved or someone else is using your rack. You have to keep your funny bone attached, and you have to make sure that you keep everyone's interest at the foremost. It's something that we found we have to do with our retail sales, since the sales go down so much in the wintertime, and we don't get too many people way out into the country where we are. It's challenging because of GPS. Everybody's got their cell phone out and they're trying to find us out there in the countryside. We've got trail markers and everything from the state of Illinois to get people to our place. But GPS is wrong, and so they come in the back way through what we call the scenic route, which can be through cow pastures or anything else in order to get to us. Once you get there, it's fine. Everybody remembers the pathway, but very challenging. So,
Ken, could you give us a little bit of your background, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I can echo a lot of what Diane just said, too. We fought a lot of the same things starting out, and I'm the sixth generation here on the farm, born and raised right here in Normal, with the exception, the only 4 years gone from here was down at U of I in Champaign, and then I went into sales for 7 years and came back and joined the family farm in 2000, and at the time we were at record all-time milk prices, and within 6 months we were at record all-time low prices. And it was one of those things where the family was scratching our head, trying to raise two families on 60 milk cows and 400 acres really doesn't pencil out nowadays. And it was just one of those timing things for me. I happened to be up at World Dairy Expo and saw a cheese plant demoing product out using the milk from the show cows. And it's one of those things where you're on your way home and you stop south of Rockford and start putting pencil to paper, and really the rest has been history. We started making cheese in 2006, and none of us had ever made cheese before, so it was a first-time learning experience. I took a short course up at Madison. It was kind of microbiology 101, 102 all over again. But the guys we bought the plant from were actually licensed cheesemakers in the state of Wisconsin. So we began cheddar right away and making Colby, and it's crafted out now where about 96% of our business is wholesale. And we're also, even though it's Bloomington Normal and the demographics show strong numbers here in McLean County, we've got to take the product to the customer. And so we found that out right away. But we're in the process of another expansion now, too, so I can relate to what Diane had to say there. We're hopefully going to have a new plant up and going about 3 times the capacity here in the next 90 days. And so our plate is full as well.
Our next question is, how did you develop your brand? How was the development of your new unique brand brought about? And we'll go ahead and switch it back to Diane.
We found out when we were deciding what we were going to call this little venture of ours, that if we were going to use a fanciful name for our business, that we would have to have it approved by the federal government. And if we used our last name, we could usurp that and be able to just start using our name with the vineyards and just go straight from there. So of course we chose 4C Vineyards and Winery. One of the things that we considered was all the wonderful, wonderful labels that are out there, and we had our favorites picked out. One of our friends had a winery up in northern Illinois and used lots of images from the Renaissance on all of his bottles. Each bottle had a different picture on it, and very, very industrial looking, very, very slick. And we found that people would come and talk to us and say, we can't remember the name of we can't remember the picture on this particular variety of wine of his. And we found that it would be better if we kept the picture on the label the same on everything, and then change the varietal or the fanciful name that is on it, so that when people walk in and they're looking for your product or they haven't seen it before, you want something that's very, very catchy. You want something that they recognize immediately, because once they have that image in their mind, that's what they're going to be looking for. So we chose a picture of the winery as it opened up in 2006. It doesn't look anything like that anymore. We're in the middle of expanding the entire front of the winery out. That should be done in May. There's so many changes on there, but we hate to change it at all. We thought when we first started distribution that we would put a different label out there. Gallo, for example, has over 70 different labels that they use for their wines, and it works very, very well for them, but not for us. We tried to put a fanciful label out with Norton and Corona Noir. They were not received very well because people were still looking for the picture of the winery on the front. So those labels sit in the back warehouse collecting dust while we got our label back out for them that had the old picture of the winery on it. One of the other considerations is when you're having your labels made up, it works very, very well if you're whether you're doing a different kind of cheese, or you're doing sprockets, or you're making jams and jellies. If you've got that main image out there, the state of Illinois even will help you with their programs. Made in Illinois, they will provide stickers for that. They will help you to get stickers that if you're making different kinds of jams and jellies, you can put a picture, an extra sticker on your jar of pears or blackberries or whatever, to kind of hone in on the differences that you have in your products, but still have that main image that people recognize.
Yeah, I know. I look for the label. She's right. You get that a quick image, and so you know it's from your winery when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, could you address your branding and how you came about?
Sure. And once again, I can echo a lot of what Diane said. When we were looking at developing that logo, you really got to put a lot of thought into it, because the wordage plays a lot into how the federal government looks at trademarking. And the sooner that you can get on a project like that, the better off you are, playing with different images and different words. Because, and I know Diane's familiar with Mary and Rudy up here at White Oak Winery. They just went through a drastic change with the fact that somebody else came in and got their trademark. on the name. And so what does that do after you're in business for 5 to 10 years? It really throws you into a tailspin of trying to do some catch-up work, because it's hard to change the name once you start getting some establishment. And we haven't varied away from our logo. The other thing that's big for us too, of course, you've got the state, the USDA, the FDA, even your local county involved in is nutritional values on your labeling. It's probably even more stringent in the alcohol/liquor business. But for us, we really had to start looking at things differently when we started crossing state lines. And, once we branched out into the beef, pork, and chicken, it was important to have that federal label as versus state labels. So what's it do? We're kind of handcuffed as to what markets you can use for your processing, things like that, because you've got to fly straight when you get into these markets. And so it's taken a lot of time to get that developed, and we still have to tinker from time to time to make sure everything's right. But we haven't had it vary from the main emblem or logo that we used. But once again, I can't stress enough how important it is to get on that really in advance of getting the product launched, because you're going to have a few headaches. And there's a lot of chiefs and not a whole lot of Indians, and that's the way that we see the paperwork handed down to us anyway. So that's about all I've got on the branding side.
Our next question is, how did you start the process of selling your products off-site? And so, Diane, I know you sell off-site quite a bit. I see you about everywhere. So how did you get started?
As I mentioned, our sales fall in the winter out there for retail sales at the winery. So it was imperative that we do something to get the wine to the customer. One of our challenges was the fact that if I was selling sprockets and I go into a retailer who sells sprockets to his customers, and those sprockets are made in China and they're being sold for 80 cents a piece, and you know that your sprockets cost twice that for you to make here in the United States. The first challenge is going to be showing that retailer why it's important for him to be using your sprockets made in the United States versus the ones that are brought in from China. So especially in the wine industry, we have wine called $2 Chuck, and it's called $2 Chuck because it sells on wholesale for $2. So when we come in, we have to be especially cognizant of what is on those shelves, what our competition is, and what the territory will bear in the way of product and what people are going to buy. So you have to know your territory that you're going into very, very well. The other thing you need to do is make sure that you've got samples with you. Especially with the product that we deal in, there are so many out there that you have to sell your product to the retailer before the retailer will sell your product to the customer. And we work very, very hard to show why, number one, our price point is a little bit higher, how the retailer can recoup his funds. So we help them in their marketing, in showing them what kind of profit that they can make off of our product versus something like $2 Chuck. And we have to be sure that we get everybody involved in that retail store. You can have a manager that is gung-ho on being able to sell your wine to his customers, but if his salespeople are not on board, I don't drink wine or something like that, they're not going to do a very good job for that manager, and you're going to find that you're not selling as much wine to that store that you would like to. So it's all in marketing. You've got to help sell that product, you can't just drop it off and let them try it on their own. You'll find somebody took it home, had a wonderful dinner with their family, but it never got back to the people that were actually buying the product at the store. So you do your tastings and things like that there, and you really have to work on selling your product.
Ken, could you share a little bit about what you did to get your product sold off-site and your process?
Sure. We are about 96% of our business is wholesale. And so the same way, our farm is a destination. It's a tour stop, but I don't rely on that customer showing up on a weekly basis. We've got to take it to them. And so what I did starting out was do a lot of demographic studies. And you've got your pockets, the Springfield area, Bloomington, Peoria, Champaign, for us starting out here in central Illinois. And it's a lot of grabbing samples, throwing them in the back of the vehicle and going out and visiting with the deli managers and such, making sure that they get a try at it. I've always said if we can get it in their mouth, they'll buy it. And the price point on it, what's become a big push, we used to have the buzzwords of the organic and things like that, but the more local that product is and that we can go in and establish face with that customer, the more likely they are to carry our product. We have the same issues. Some retailers are better than others, of course, at marketing product. And what we found, we've got a lot of growth within several systems that are employee owned, where everybody wants to see that product move if they're going to carry it. And sometimes we get lost in the bigger stores. But the deli managers and that at certain locations have done a great job. Right now we're in about 250 locations within a 200-mile radius of Bloomington Normal. And so really we haven't tapped into the St. Louis market, and we haven't tapped into the Chicago market. For us, the growth has been the smaller towns, a lot of wineries, things such as that. But it keeps us going. My dad, who's going to be 75 years old next month, still loves to go out and visit with our customers. And I'm the same way. So we're on the road all the time. And, you've got to be ready to do the miles. We drive about 1,600 miles a piece each week. And that's not only to talk to the customer, but also we do all the distribution too. And we've tried various distributors for our product, but it's you start losing that face, and that means a lot. You start seeing dips in sales, things like that. Our big push here in the last 2 years has been, how do we offset that downturn in January, February, and March? After the Super Bowl, per se, everything quiets down for us on the cheese side as far as sales, and then it'll start ramping back up once everybody's out cooking out again. So really, there's a lot of different angles to come at there, but be ready to spend some time out there. The nice part is, and I know Diane's probably seen the same thing, you've got people coming at you now and asking to carry your product, and it sure is a lot easier to talk to it than it is walking in on a cold call. And it just takes time to get established in that.
One of the things is it usually takes 10 cold calls before you actually land a retailer. One of my best tips to pass on to someone that is looking at distribution is to make sure that you push yourself to try to buy something at that retail spot every once in a while, to see that that retailer is going to be watching you walk through their store. And if you're selling something and you go in and you start buying something from them, it's very, very well received, and they feel like you are trying to reciprocate for their business, and I cannot stress enough how important that is.
Great, good advice, very good. And finally, what are the standards required before entering into the retail sales market? And we'll start with Diane again.
The alcohol industry is governed very, very well by the federal government and the state government. One of the first things you have to do in Illinois is apply for a business sales tax number, so that whenever you sell something, the state is going to get their share of the sales tax. Okay. The second thing you have to do is you have to register your products with the state of Illinois. Um, you have to send in all of your labels and have those on file with the state. The federal government has to approve every wine that you make. They have to approve the label. They have to approve the font size of the printing on the labels. They don't care so much about the pictures on it. You can change the pictures. You can change what you call the wine as long as it's within the same wine class. All of these things are governed by the federal government, and it took us 2 years to get our peach sangria approved by the federal government, and went through the state very, very easily. So it depends on what your product is. I'm sure there's going to be different regulations on everything. I wanted to mention the Food and Drug Administration. I don't know if Ken has been approached by the FDA within the last year or so, but they had a big project going where they had to visit every winery in the United States starting in November of 2016 and ending May 1st of 2017. And one of the big things that they told us when they came and visited us in November was the fact that on recall, when you have a product out there and there's a customer complaint and the Federal Food and Drug Administration wants to recall that product, if you've got a production number somewhere on your product, every batch that you make is going to be a different production number. And if that item is recalled, you only have to pull the production number that there was an issue with, instead of pulling all of your product from everywhere that you've got it. So it's going to save you a lot of time and energy and money by being able to pull just that small segment out of the retail sector.
That's very interesting. Something you don't think about, but yeah, how do they, when they do a recall, they would have to be able to know, and if you don't know, you have to pull it
You have to pull it all.
Wow.
Right.
Ken, can you talk about the standards that were required for you to enter into the market?
Yeah, and it is a hopefully Diane will laugh at this, but it is definitely the office of the redundancy department.
Yes.
When it comes to regulation. We've got the county, the state, the USDA, and the FDA all involved on our farm. And sometimes I struggle with the fact that with today's technology, we've got 4 different entities doing what one person could do. But the traceability has become the big issue, and Diane was talking about that. I joke around with the deli managers when we're in stores, because we've got an expiration date on the front of the sticker or the label that's on the product itself, and then we also have what I refer to as like a Budweiser born on date on the side. And what that is, that gives us traceability in case there is a recall. And that's something that we had to start doing about 4 years ago, because we weren't keeping stringent enough logs on the product itself. But as we continue to grow, we see the need for that, and that's something that the state wants to see. We've got, of course, periodic testing on not only the finished product, but we're always under the gun as far as culturing the raw dairy product too, to make sure everything's good and clean there. The one thing I always struggle with is over-regulation of product, because we don't want to see anybody get sick either. So it's up to us to do that testing, and that the question is how much enforcement is too much. Starting out, you can really, really beat your head against the wall, because you may be told something from somebody, someone else is going to tell you something different, and it's unfortunate that way. And I know when we start doing farmers markets and that, counties are even different from county to county. Some are very loose, some are very strict. And so those are the kinds of things you got to be ready for when you're out there. But just keeping in constant contact with these with the managers and people that you're selling your product to, wholesaling it to, is huge for us. Does it consume your life? You bet. You're going to have people calling you night and day, not only with orders and such, but they want to know what exactly is this product. But once again, we got to remain the face of that. We've got to be out there talking with customers. We lose that when we start talking with the distributors and such. So stay with it on the requirement side. And like I said, if there's ever questions about that, I don't know if anybody's getting into the meat and dairy side of things, even the egg side of things. But it's a whole nother beast as compared to the alcohol side. I've often joked around, I wouldn't want to try and do the alcohol side. It just seems so confusing to me. But that's the line that we're in. So it's working out. And as we continue to grow and we get more people involved, we've got 15 employees now. And that's a whole nother can of worms there too. And you want to take your growth pattern fairly slow. I've often said sometimes rapid growth can be the death of a business too, and we can find that out the hard way at times. Just be careful on that side of things and make sure you got all your trademarking and all that stuff done ahead of time. Everything gets approved so that you're ready to rock and roll when you do get final approval.
To see if there were some questions from the floor, any specific questions that attendees may have for our guest. Lisa's typing. What's a sprocket? No! Otherwise known as a widget. Go ahead, Diane.
I hate to use the wine industry all the time, and I thought it'd be something where I'm not sure what the interest is of people that are attending or listening or anything like that. So I try to spread things out just a little bit so that it's all about the wine industry. I would say that if you're getting ready to start a business and you have that fire in your belly, you're one of the luckiest people in the world. There's nothing in the world like an entrepreneur who goes out there and creates a business. And like Ken said, starting out slowly and finding your niche and being able to expand that and then bring in the rest of the family or employees and actually see that all expand. I know in business school they tell you, oh, you should have this 5-year plan going forward and make sure that you have everything in line and your succession plan and everything. But there's something about going out there and starting a business and not knowing what it's going to look like in 5 years. We went out there and we planted grapes, and by the 3rd year, when they were just starting to produce, we had already changed from thinking that we were going to sell our grapes on the market to taking care of the grapes themselves and actually putting that product out to the consumer and getting rid of the middleman, because we already saw where the profit was going to be made. And when we first started out, that was not on the radar at all. So sometimes the surprise is kind of the cream on the cake.
Yeah.
So
It's excellent business advice in general. So a question: do either of you use social media in your business? And if so, what medias and for what purposes? Informational, customer feedback, etc. Social media. Who wants to tackle that one?
I can hit that one first. The tool that I use a lot of Facebook. And to be real honest, I'm not a technology guy. In fact, when I come home and I'm pulling my hair out with something computer-wise, I'm leaning on my 14-year-old daughter to help me out because she's so much more advanced than I am on these things. But Facebook does a wonderful job. I'll put a video out of a cow calving or something like that, and I think we had like 21,000 hits on that in a 24-hour period. It's just amazing how many people pay attention to that. And it goes a long way because it's free. And you can spend a lot of money advertising, and we get bombarded with that stuff. And I know Diane can speak about it too, but you've got people coming out of the woods to try and sell you packages for advertising. Just take your time on that stuff. Keep it local to start, let it grow out from there. There's a lot to it. And I wanted to echo a little something on what Diane had added on that last question. If we were to follow the growth pattern, what a business plan looks like or where it should be, I was honestly ready to throw the towel in about 5 years ago. I just thought, this is crazy. And it wasn't until that 6th year that we really started to see things bloom. And so there's times that you can really, really get down on yourself, and the family's trying to keep you propped up because you lose that fire that Diane talked about. And it's hard. When it's smoldering, you want to keep it going. And here these last couple of years, it's actually been a lot of fun to kind of sit back and watch the growth happen. And that's the neat part about the small business side.
We do have another question. Diane, how did you learn people didn't like the new labels? Was it sales or feedback?
Actually, it was feedback. People would say, where can I go to find your Norton? And we would say, well, it's at the local IGA store, or over at this store, or at that one. And they would say, no, we were there, couldn't find it. And that's what gave us the clue. They were still looking for the regular label, and they were not recognizing that difference. So it was definitely the feedback. Once they knew what to look for, that was fine. It was the product that they wanted. But no, we had to go back to that regular logo. I want to get back to using social media for just a moment. One of the things that we use on our website is a way for people to order our product, and we do use a company that takes care of the sales for us, and they will take orders for most of the states, and pay the sales tax for us, which is very, very important when you've got a product that you're going from state to state for, especially in the alcohol industry. You have to be sure that the state sales tax is paid in each state, and you have to have a license to sell in each of those states. So if you have 35 states, you're going to have 35 different licenses that you have to keep up. And these companies go out there and they will get those licenses so that they can do your product in those states, and they take care of the sales tax for you. We take care of all the sales in state so that we are responsible for the sales tax going to Illinois. That way I don't have to worry about somebody else paying our state, and I've got someone else who can answer for the other sales tax states. The other thing that we do on Facebook is make sure that we try to put something out there every single day. Facebook gives us a lot of feedback. There's a lot of reports that you can pull that tells you where you are at from day to day, week to week, month to month, what kind of feedback you're getting on Facebook, who's paying attention, who's not paying attention, and what their interests are, even their age groups, which is all part of the marketing that you need to use. So.
Very good. And I'll just put a plug in, if you're really interested in social media, that on May 8th, I'm going to be talking about social media as part of this program as well. So we'll really dive into a lot of those analytics and all the really cool tools, I call them toys, all the cool tools that are available, and how most of it's free. So you got to love that. I was just going to ask a question on my own that I'm curious about. What was the role of mentorship for you when you were getting started? Did you find a mentor in the industry that was able to help guide you, or a business mentor that kind of really was very helpful to you?
For us, it was the Illinois Grape Growers and Vintners Association. Every year they have a convention in Springfield, and we're able to go there, talk across the table, to other people that are in the industry and learn from their mistakes and from their successes. The IGGVA gives us a lot of different ports where we can market our products during the state fair or um, their um, their marketing efforts in different events throughout the year. But they will help you. They bring in the TTB, that's the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, which is the part of the federal government that covers our labels. It covers all of the um, uh, all of the licensing and everything that the federal government requires. They will have 2 or 3 people from the TTB there, and they will go through every single form that has to be filled out and sent in order to set yourself up as a winery. And then they have the state come in and show you what they currently have on file and how to fill those forms out and get those things taken care of. We seem to get a lot of changes through the state of Illinois all the time. The federal government has gotten a lot better. It's a lot smoother operation. I can have a label in there that is being applied for, and I get an approval from one person and I get a declined application from somebody else for the same label. So they still have a few glitches out there, but by and large, it's a much faster process now. And so anytime, I cannot stress this enough, anytime that you set up with the government, follow everything that they tell you to do. You can't argue with it. You're not gonna win. But if you follow everything that they do, you cannot get in trouble. They come in. The first time I was visited by the state in checking out our winery, the gentleman came in, the inspector, and he said, "Okay, I'm from the state of Illinois and I'm here to inspect your winery." And I looked at him and said, "Okay." And he says, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "No. Tell me what I'm doing wrong and I will fix it." And I said, "That's the only thing that I can do." And he says, "Okay, good attitude." And I've never had a problem with the state. If I find I did something wrong, go in there, cry on their shoulder, ask for mercy, but let them know what you did, and they'll help you get it all figured out. So there is a lot of resource out there.
What about you, Ken? Did you find some resources or mentors that help you out along the way?
You know, that's a great question because we were doing our own thing. There was no such thing as cheese making in Central Illinois, and I had some help from a guy about 45 minutes north of us, little town of Minunk, where they made some cheese, and he'd come down and spend some time with me. And when it came to the business side of things, believe it or not, I spent a lot of time with Paul and Diane Hahn out at their winery, and they really kind of kicked us into gear because Paul and I could sit down. He'd have a big band out there on a Saturday night, and we'd be able to talk shop. And it was huge for me because really they got started just a little bit before we did, and they were going through a lot of the same ups and downs, and here recently, of course, they're going through some changes again. But it's been a lot of dipping our foot in the pool for us anyway, and then we can always rely on the guys up at Darlington that build our cheese plant, that if there's questions on the cheese side specifics, we can always go to them and at least have an open hash session about it and try and figure out what we can do. But a lot of this has been trial by error, and it's part of the small business and the growth pattern on that too.
All right, we have another question. Did either of you write a formal business plan before starting? If so, what sources did you use for putting together the pieces?
You want that one, Diane?
Gee, thanks, Ken. We did. We did do a formal business plan. It wasn't something that we felt was really important when we first started out. But we found that, number one, when working with a bank, you have to turn in that financial statement every year. And it was very helpful, since we were not there when it went before the board, to kind of give them an idea, a synopsis of what had happened during that particular year and where you were going to from that point until the next time that you had to fill out that form. That was one thing. Another thing was your corporate attorney likes to know where you're headed. And the third thing was, we got a grant from the state of Illinois when we built our pavilion for the chairs and tables, and that set us up also for that business plan. All of those things that they tell you in class that you actually need, yeah, you actually need them. You really do. And it also helps to solidify some of the things, some of the issues that you have that come up during the year, and they kind of get set aside. You take a look at that business plan and you say, okay, now this is what we had planned on back in June, but come December, we found that somebody else had a different result from what happened. And because of that experience, it helps you to determine whether you're on the right path or not. The business plan is going to change 57 different times, but it's something that has evolved into being an intricate part of our business.
I too, on the business plan side, and I know I can back up Diane, mine changes daily, sometimes multiple times during the day, and sometimes it's just sitting back and taking a deep breath on it. The hard part for us is a small business going in, and I don't think it would be a whole lot different for the wine industry either. You go in front of a lender and you talk to them about what you're thinking, and they look at you like you got a horn that just grew out of the middle of your forehead. It's just a different beast, because they really don't have anything to compare it to. It's not fair to take someone like Diane and compare it to the Gallows of the world. And on this scale that we're talking about, there's not a paper trail for them to look at. And so really you're selling yourself to these bankers and such that you're talking to. When we first started, it was trouble there. And we had the same thing where we got a value-added grant through the state, and that was really my first big formal business plan. We had the idea and we had a lot of writing done, but to actually do a business plan wasn't until we got that value-added grant. And it's been modified a couple times from there, and now that we're going from our first plant into a brick-and-mortar setup, it's a whole lot different. I don't get that same look from the lenders that I did when we were first starting out, because, man, there was a road to hoe, because you had to find people to listen to you for a while there. And now their ears, they look more like a show steer. They're looking at you, and they're wondering where we're going. So yeah, it's been an interesting road over 10 years. Faces have changed a lot. So it's been a good road.
I think that might be the quote for the day, is bankers looking like show steers. That's great. I love it.
And just a real quick tip. When you go in to talk to a banker, you're right. You are selling yourself. But you tell them this is what you're going to do. You don't go in there and say, well, can I do this or can I do that? You say, this is what we are going to do. And that makes 50% of your approach. It shows the confidence that you have in yourself and in what you're going to do.
That's excellent advice. And given your background, Diane, in banking, I think that's like a double dose of good advice. You've seen it from both ends. But yeah, I do think you have to be confident. It's not about what we're going to try to do. It's what we're going to do. Another question, does the percentage of your annual budget spent on marketing stay constant from year to year, or what trends have you seen thus far in the life of your business?
I'll hit that one first. You took one for the team last time, Diane.
All right.
The I've always said that if I can keep my spending on advertising, and I also make another lump into that, and I know that Diane probably has the same thing down there with gift certificates. We get hit for donations all the time, and it's really hard to pencil that out as a small business because you've got all the various groups and schools and such. And so what I've done is I've gone through and kind of developed my own system on, first off, who does this, who does that, and then we put that together. I try and keep my spending somewhere in that 5 to 7% range, because I'm more apt, if I can put product out there with our label and everything like that, it's great. But when it comes to TV, radio, things like that, we're really just making our first dive into the TV side here in the next couple months. And it's scary because when they hit you with those dollar signs, it's like, wow. But at the same time, it's a growth pattern you've got to be in. Starting out, it was important for us to do the local donations and really get the product out there so that people could see that label, could try the product, and then branch out from there. But that 5 to 7% range for me is where I'm at, as far as, I like to call it giving, but because I always look at advertising as a loss. I hate saying it that way, but it's hard to pencil that out, especially when they're hitting you with all those big dollar signs.
I agree. The marketing has changed where you put your ad in the local newspaper. That worked for a little while, but after being in business for 10 years, I still get people that do not know that we are out here within a 50-mile radius, and it's shocking. It really is.
I'm shocked.
Yes. What we found is we're doing more social media. Absolutely. I agree about the gift certificates. We put ourselves into a box and said we are only going to spend this much money in giving out gift certificates or doing baskets or that. One of the things that the state has done for us is they do not allow us to give away our product anymore. So we had to go to the gift certificates. But what that does, it does bring those people, whether they're going into an event and they're going to bid on those sealed envelopes and bring those back to the winery to buy our product, or it gets the traffic flow back to us when we give those out. So that's a good way to get started. But definitely the social media, anything that you can do with different websites and the travel websites, you have to get everything you can onto those sites so that they are directing people to you also. And a lot of them are free. Just making sure that you're taking advantage of everything you possibly can. Try to expand away from your local area once you're established and keep expanding that area. We're down to St. Louis and all the way up to Champaign with a lot of what we do, and it's a lot of foot travel and a lot of going in and making sure that the product is out there, and then questioning customers, making sure that if you have retail sales, that you make sure that you're questioning those customers about where they shop, where they would normally pick up a product such as yours, and then you can visit those areas and try to get something established in that area to show the customer that you're, number one, interested in where they shop, and you want to get that convenient for them to purchase, and that makes a repeat sale.
Okay, we have another question. What is some advice you wish had been shared to you during the first year of business? That's a great question.
Yours or mine, Diane?
What do you wish you'd known that first year?
First year of business. I call it the slippery slope. we already mentioned about taking it easy, taking it slow when you first start your business out. A lot of times it doesn't happen quite that way. We put our building up, and the next thing we knew, we were very, very busy people, and we did not anticipate all of this. When we were making our wine before we opened to the public, we brought people in that would stop and see what the crazy Forsies were up to, and we would drag them into what I say is we dragged them into the winery kicking and screaming to taste the wine. And this was not a big wine area, but what we inadvertently did is we created a loyalty to those products because people felt that they had helped develop the wine style. And so when we opened up on that very first day, it was the 2nd of February. There was 8 inches of snow outside, and we thought, yeah, we're really doing good here, right? Okay, another one of those decisions that really panned out well. But what happened is we never expected our place to be absolutely crammed full of people that had brought out their friends to taste the wine that they had helped make. And it was something that we just fell into. I wish I had planned a little better for that, but we've been open year-round ever since, so it worked out very well for us. Yeah, some advice that somebody had shared. So.
The one thing that I would have done much differently in that first year / 2 years, what happens is, as we see growth, we're still trying to manage too many things. And for me, I would have gotten an accountant involved immediately. And what happened was, you come home at night, you're tired, you're trying to do the paperwork, something gets messed up, you put it on the back burner, and next thing you know, you're putting out fires. And so, you may not have a whole lot of spendable money or liquid to start, but getting a few key areas covered. For us, it was the accounting side. I'm great with numbers. I just don't want to sit down and do the paperwork. And I'll be the first one to admit that. The thing is, I like to sell. And so I've always taken that on, that we get the product out there. We've now got people in the right places, and that helps things click. But that first year was pivotal for us on the accounting.
I'll share one more tip with that first year. We were visiting another winery, and he was in his tank room making wine down in southern Illinois, and he pulled out this big pad of yellow paper, and he had all different kinds of notes listed on it, and you could see the old pages that were rolled up and a little bit of gray with age. And he said, "This is my my lifeline to what I do in the winery. Every day when I do something to a certain batch of wine, or I do something in production and we bottle something or whatever," he said, "I don't care what goes into the computer." He says, "This piece of paper," he says, "I've got everything written down of what I do every single day." And I took that to heart. I don't know how many times I have to go back and see when exactly we did this or when exactly we did that. The federal government is all about sugar. 13.5 pounds of sugar is equivalent to 1 gallon of wine. And so every time my husband pours anything into that vat of wine, I've got to make sure it gets down on that log and gets into the computer. Sometimes it gets in right away. Sometimes it's weeks before we get the computer caught back up. But you've got to have that log every single day, no matter what you're doing, to keep you on track and to save a little bit of that, "Oh my gosh, when did we do that?" kind of thing. So,
another question I had was, you kind of talked about how the community helped you, Diane, with your creations of some of your first wines, and then how you, Ken, had some help with the cheesemaker. Did you guys do any market testing prior to opening up, or do you still do market testing, or do you just kind of feel it out? Anything formal, or just friends and family?
we have all of our employees are required to taste the wine. I don't know what Ken does on his end, but in order to be able to explain to people what a wine tastes like, or whether it's sweet or dry or off dry or semi-sweet, you've got to be familiar with your product. We've also got tastings that we do at the winery. Some wineries charge for them. What we feel is that when someone comes in and they're not familiar with our wines, the best thing that we can do is let them sample them without a cost. And that way, when they choose a wine to enjoy, they know what they're getting. And if they just buy a bottle, when they get home, they know what it's going to taste like. They know how you're going to be able to pair it, and it makes a more enjoyable experience. There's nothing worse than going into a wine shop and taking a look at all those bottles out there and not knowing exactly what you're getting, that sort of thing. So we do that. We make sure the retailers get samples. We do tastings at places like Friar Tuck's, and that where we make sure that customers who come in, DK's and Hamel, all of the different area stores, we will do tastings in there for free, and it's part of our marketing in order to make sure that those customers know what is available out there.
We do a lot of the same thing as far as making sure that product, and Diane talked about Friar Tuck. We give Mark Maskey as much product as he needs to go to those different Friar Tucks, so that when he does his sampling every Saturday afternoon, he can put some of our cheese out in front of that customer as well. A little salt and a little sugar, they go together. And the other thing I was laughing a little bit about with what Diane said, we do have our employees try the product. And there's certain ones, I understand if someone doesn't want the habanero cheddar or things like that, but I always tell the cheesemakers to keep it down to 2 pieces of cheese or else I'm going to choke them. Otherwise they're eating our profits. But
yeah.
we are huge on making sure that, a little bit farther to the north of you guys too, and that's a little different as we're talking here to these people that are asking questions that you've got there. Up in our neck of the woods, the big push has been on Hy-Vee, and Hy-Vee has really swept across the 74 corridor up here and down in Springfield as well. And they became our largest customer literally overnight, where we were providing product to 2 or 3 Hy-Vees, and now we're in over 40 locations. And that's what I mean by we got to really keep our thumb on that growth, because it sounds like a great time, except that I'm the one driving 600 miles to try and get product delivered out in a day's time. And at the same time with that, each location we go into, we're handing off pieces of cheese. Use this for your sampling. I always make a deal, and it sounds like Diane does the same. When I go into a new location, I always tell them, I'm going to come in and sample. That way I can meet your customer. Not only that, but the employees can hear the story as well. Nothing better than having a contained audience, and you're not having to explain it 1,000 different times. And that's huge for us, and it's the same way. My mom's a retired school teacher. And when people show up at our store, and we've got a little store here on the farm, whether they want to or not, they're going to see the calves, they're going to see the cows, they're going to go see the cheese plant, and we're always shaking our head, here goes Carol again. But it's great because those customers never forget that. And that's huge for us.
Definitely. That kind of also plays into the idea of our next presentation is going to be devoted to agritourism and how that's a growing industry. And I think both of you could probably touch on just briefly on agritourism and its importance to your industry.
Agritourism, I'll take this one first, Diane. We're set up here. We're in a strange zone because the county would not let us be commercial. And so we're still zoned to agriculture, and which makes sense to me, except that we've got a retail store and all that. Anyway, we're in a gray area because what they had to do was actually make a a variance for us, and they called it agritourism. And what has happened, we've brought a lot of people into the situation. Like I know Friday we've got 2 of the Peoria charter buses coming in with about 100 people total. And you've got to factor in that time frame of giving the tour and doing all that. I get so excited when I see a bus of retired people pull in because I know they're going to spend money. You know, and that's all joking aside, it's got to happen. When you give tours, you've got to have people buying product, or else it just doesn't work. And we try and convey that to the customers too. Hey, you know, we've got product in there. It's all available. We put samples out. Try what you can. But the tourism part, there's a lot of heritage here. We were the first family to break the prairie, and we've still got the original land documents signed off by Van Buren. You know, it's amazing how deep the heritage can go into this thing too. And I know Diane's got a lot of the same thing down there. It's an ever-growing business. You've got to make yourself presentable to the public. They want to see what happens. If you're hiding stuff, you know, they're not going to buy the product. And so it's big for us.
You're right. We're in very similar industries. The agritourism in our area, one of the things that we pushed for was to bring out FFA. Not so much to get free labor out in the vineyards, of course, but what we found is that the kids would come out and pick grapes, and we would donate to their fund for FFA jackets, or the conference in Kansas City when they have their annual get-togethers, and that the kids got a big kick out of being out there and getting a free lunch afterward, and they had a lot of fun. Kept it very, very light. One of the other things that we pressed into their memory was the fact that when you come from a farm that has granddad and dad and you and your brother and your sister, and everybody wants to stay on the family farm, there's just not enough acreage out there or enough ground to rent to keep everybody sustainably employed. So we let them know about the vineyards, that you, with as little as 5 acres, that you can make a pretty good living on growing grapes on one corner of some of the poorest grain growing ground that you've got on the farm, in order to let the kids know that there's alternatives in agriculture. We also try to work with master gardeners. They always want to know if they can come out to the farm and share what we have there in the vineyards with the master gardeners. I always invite them to come out and help plant grapes. I've never quite gotten that done yet. There's something about planting grapes and being on your knees for a few hours that I don't know. I guess there's something against that. But we find that people from the retirement homes, we get a lot of people out there, and one of the first things they want to do is to walk out in the vineyards and see what's growing out there. They get a big kick out of being able to come back with a few clusters of grapes and that, and it's okay. We can lose a few clusters of grapes. That's not a problem. But being able to go out there with a glass of wine and take a look at the grapes that wine came from is a big thing. We do get our groups of buses, and the first thing they want to do is go out and look at the vineyards and go through the tank room, and we don't charge for those. We feel that it's part of our education into the wine industry. I know a lot of people charge, but we've always felt like it's giving back just a little bit. So, good.
So I think I know where I want to get a job in my next life. I'm going to work in your sampling rooms because I have to drink everything then. And then I want to go up to Ken and have some of that delicious cheese because there's nothing I like better than wine and cheese. So, hey, I've got a second, career. Maybe I'll come out and help and volunteer just for free samples. That would be great. Do we have any more questions? This has been really, really fascinating.
I wanted to make one more point, and on when you do open yourselves up to the public, you're going to have some headaches. There's no way around it. We have things happen like we got turned into the Department of Ag because we were housing our calves in dog houses. The hard part is it doesn't matter how many times you want to explain what's going on. There's someone there that's not listening. And I think we find that across the board in all agriculture. It's the same fight that we hear about the GMOs and things like that. And you've got to be prepared for the ups and downs because it's going to happen. Guaranteed. Not every day is unicorns and rainbows. You're going to have problems somewhere along the line, and just really take your time, take a deep breath. It's all going to work out.
That's good advice. Anything else you want to add, Diane? While we're at it, anything I missed?
just the fact that you need to not downgrade all of your life experiences when you go into a new venture. Embrace everything that you have experienced, everything you have learned. If you worked on let's say heating and cooling, and you're sick and tired of working in heating and cooling and you want to go into doing something else, the first time that your heater goes out in your business, who do you call? You're going to have that life experience to draw on. So even if you're going into something brand new, all those things that you have done in your lifetime, bring it all on because it's going to help you in the long run.
It's a very positive way. I mean, it's true. I think once you get into business, you do have to wear so many hats, especially in the beginning. And so you have to embrace all of your experiences because that's what makes you and your product and your business unique. It's yourselves and your experiences.
The only other thing I would add is be sure to not put yourself in a box where you feel like you're all alone. Like Ken talked about going out and talking with Paul Hahn and his wife Diane. People that we really looked up to. They helped us when we were still checking out the wine industry, and we loved visiting with them. You've got to get out there and you've got to talk with your peers and you've got to share your experiences because you're going to find out, oh my gosh, everybody else is having the same problems. And it helps to spread out that feeling that you have that maybe there's not something you can change right now, but the camaraderie and being able to know that you're not alone in dealing with this. Hillsborough area has had a terrible winter, and we've had 5 of our major businesses change hands as we speak. And it's going to make a big difference in the area. And all of those people, we sit there and we say, okay, how was your winter? And everybody says, oh, it was terrible. Sales were really down and things like that. And you go, yes, us too, or you talk to a distributor and we've got beer at the winery and you come in and the beer distributor says, oh, he says, you're not alone. We didn't get, we had our worst month in, years and things like that. You have to share those times. It's easy to share the really good times, but you've got to share those down times too, to know where you stand in the industry and that you're not alone.
And I would say too that in a community, when you share things like that, maybe it will spur ideas amongst all the businesses on how they can try to kind of help pull each other out of the loop and then work more together to create kind of a synergy. And we know with agritourism, it's great if there's other businesses along the trail, so to speak. Wineries
Yes,
are very
right.
big on the trails. And so you can gather more people when you have more to offer. So the
Right.
more you have to offer, the better you are. But you won't get there if you don't talk with each other.
Right.
So
Exactly.
communication, networking is great.
Yeah.
Anything else, Ken, you want to add for the road?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to visit with everybody, and it's just to reinforce, a lot of times we want to put on that game face in business, but it's better to have all your cards out there and let people be a part of that. And joking around with Diane about the sprocket deal, if I'm having a bad time, so's the sprocket guy, more than likely.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
It doesn't matter what trade we're in. We're all fighting January, February, and March.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's great to be able to work together. The wine industry's been huge for our business, and we've tried to help return that. There's a lot of wineries in Illinois, and that's part of the thing, the dynamics. The wine industry was one of the largest growing industries in Illinois, and along with farmers markets. I don't see a whole lot of cheesemakers out there, but there's a lot of camaraderie between the winemakers and ourselves. But, it's been a fun ride, and just enjoy it. I like the story about the guy that's got the tablet, because I understand that. It's amazing what I haven't put on paper. Not that I'm full of knowledge, but for what I've gone through in 10 years, there's a lot of things out there that I haven't talked about and probably need to. And so this is a good refresher for me too, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh no, this has been great. I've learned a lot, and I would probably never be a very good winemaker or a cheesemaker, but
Come on out, we'll get you started.
but I can definitely appreciate it, and I think it's just good. It's good advice for any business, and I think that we need to have more dialogue, do more of these kinds of roundtables, extension. That's what we love to do, is to help bring people together and educate people as well. And so I just want to thank you both for your time, because it was really enlightening to me as well, and I hope that everybody else who hears this will be excited and also inspired, and maybe a little wiser as well. Again, we wish to thank our guests for sharing their time and knowledge with us today. We would also like to take this opportunity to invite you to attend our other upcoming seminars for specialty food producers. These include agritourism on Monday, April 10th from 1 to 3, and social media marketing on Monday, May 8th from 1 to 3. There's no cost to attend these. However, advanced registration is required, and participants may register online on our website or by calling either the Christian County Extension Office in Taylorville at 217-287-7246 or Montgomery County Extension Office in Hillsborough at 217-532-3941. Thank you again for attending this University of Illinois Extension Seminar.